the recording. There we go. So welcome to the first sort of, I guess, first virtual meeting of MESA students here on the Jumpstart platform. We're doing this to launch the MESA community on Jumpstart, which I think is a pretty cool, hopefully a cool tool for students to be able to connect with each other and with recruiters from all sorts of different companies. You know, we are doing this as one of the ways. Actually, we'd be doing this anyway, but I think it's especially important now in the age of pandemic, when we aren't able to have real in-person meetings and convenings. We won't be having a live student leadership conference this year, so this is an exciting opportunity for us to get to know each other in a different way. But please bear in mind that this is our first time doing this, and we're also testing out a product that's very new for Jumpstart as well. And so there are going to be glitches along the way, but hopefully all the benefits will outweigh the stumbles that we have. We're going to have stumbles in one way or another, but we're going to work on it to fix it. We're really excited to be partnering with Jumpstart, and Jumpstart is probably a relatively new platform in this field, and our first speaker is going to talk about that a little bit. But they've been the company has been very excited to work with MESA, and we're excited to work with them to build something that we think addresses a very, very important need for MESA students specifically, as well as students across the board. So today we're just going to take a little bit of time to get you introduced to the Jumpstart platform, as well as the community's product. And then we're also going to have a really great presentation from one of our friends at Airbnb. So I'm going to sort of step aside and let Jenna Karamanos get started. She is a VP at Jumpstart.
Yeah, I lead our partnerships team. It's so nice to meet you all virtually. I'm super excited to be able to kind of walk you through some of the functionality and how you might all use communities. I lead our work with the companies who we partner with. So we'll be hearing a little bit later from Airbnb. I work with their team to help them think through how they might reach out to students and engage with students as students are considering where they might want to work post-graduation. So that's a little bit about the work that our team does. And I'm not sure if I can share my screen. I will take a pass at it.
Before you get started, let me give you one, let's just handle one sort of logistical thing. Students,
let's do it.
If you have questions, please use the Q&A. I know that there's chat and there's Q&A, but for questions, please you know, put them in the Q&A bin, and we'll try to answer them either in text or live, depending on what the nature of your question is. So there it is. Back to you, Jenna.
Perfect. Cool. All right. So is everybody seeing a screen? I will go to the MESA community first. We'll start there. That says MESA on the top and looks like the beautiful group that we all have been invited to. Now that I am sharing, I can't see chat, so I'm going to try to open up chat too. We're going to do all the things. Amazing. Okay. If you can see it, any kind of a positive affirmation in chat would be fantastic. Beautiful. Okay. Awesome. And I'm moving to, I can see now everybody else's chat, so we'll leave space for questions, and hopefully I will have good answers about some of the functionality. So we'll see, because this is a brand new feature, but some of this is already in existence. So you all have been invited to MESA's community, and there are a couple of announcements from folks on this panel. And I've gone through and hearted this announcement. So I've loved Tom's announcement that the community is open. And I'm going to take a second to write a comment on this and say, I'm so excited to to be here with you all and add my comment to that thread. And so I think that that is like a useful illustration of just how simple this is. And it probably feels a little bit familiar for those of you who use Reddit or other sort of threaded conversation apps like that, kind of similar to that. So I can imagine that there are some questions out there about like, well, what would we need this for? What would we use this for? Because Jumpstart partners directly with a number of companies who are working to find great talent. So we work with about 100 companies today, and that number is growing all the time. There are 8 new companies who we're working with who are onboarding right now to Jumpstart. So we're always adding new partners, which is fantastic. And in addition to your MESA community, which is private to just this group, so that means that the folks who are in this community get to use this space, but there are also a number of publicly available communities on Jumpstart too. So I'll walk you through a couple of those. So my personal favorite is the Ask a Recruiter community. And in this community, my chat is dinging. I'm so sorry. I'm not sure how to mute that. So if you hear dings from me, it just means that I'm paying attention and engaging with what all is happening on the chat. So in Ask a Recruiter, it is exactly what it sounds like. So you'll see other students, potentially peers, or potentially even folks who are in this group who are coming in to ask questions to the 100+ recruiters who are part of the Jumpstart family. So this student is asking, how do I get my applications in front of a hiring recruiter? Can I have my resume critiqued? Like, would somebody, either a student or a recruiter, look at my resume? Or would somebody look at my LinkedIn profile? I've also seen, would somebody look at my Jumpstart profile? So all of those things are like great topics for this forum, and real recruiters are in here giving feedback and also sharing information about events that they might be hosting with their companies. So last Sunday night, I was watching a conversation between a recruiter at Figma and a student who was asking the wise question of, does anybody use paper resumes? Like, what do I need to print my resume and send it anywhere? And she said, no, absolutely not. But those are the types of conversations that happen in here. And there's a few more examples that I'm happy to walk through. Okay, great. So in addition to asking general questions for recruiters, this is also a place to ask process questions for recruiters. So if you are in the middle of an application process, for example, and you want to connect with a real human and get context about either how your peers are moving through that application process, or potentially from the recruiter about how it's going, this is when where a student's asking, how do I know if I've been referred? Like, what is the communication loop for me to know that a referral went through to a company that I'm applying to? And a whole bunch of students got back and answered that question for the student. So either students can respond or recruiters can respond. Anybody in the Jumpstart community can jump in here and share their wisdom. And then this is sort of the third use case that I talked through. We also do see our employer partners come in here and post information about events. So I think that's really cool and is a newer kind of use case. And so today, our partners are posting about their events in this community. In the future, our employer partners will also have their own community page. So if there's a particular company that you're really interested in, we'll talk about Airbnb, for example. You can go and look at Airbnb's company profile page, and you will see any events that they're hosting on that page too. So there's a lot of flexibility here. There are public forums and there are private forums like the MESA community that we're all in. Students can respond to other students, as well as recruiters, or the team at Jumpstart is in here all the time. We use this tool very often, so you might hear from one of us. And those are sort of the big pieces that I have as an overview. If there's anything that's particularly top of mind for anybody, I'm happy to dig in a little deeper. So go ahead and ask questions if that's helpful, or if there's anything else that I should cover, Tom, feel free to point me to that. I'll go back to MESA so we can be in our community together.
Cool. I think that's a great sort of overview. I always think that it's helpful, regardless of what the purpose of your your speech is just to hear a little bit about you and your career and how you got to your current position, and just all the good stuff about what your aspirations were and how they've evolved and things along those lines.
Yeah, I'm happy to share that. So I started my career in a little bit of an unorthodox way for somebody who's now working in tech. I started as a classroom teacher. So I was a kid growing up in my family. College was not guaranteed. It was definitely not the norm, and had a couple of high school teachers who really encouraged me to go and complete my higher education and really changed my life. So it was because of those folks that I decided when I was graduating from college, I was going to become an educator. And so I joined Teach for America and taught for 3 years in New York City, and would still be in the classroom today if my principal in my third year had not left my school and encouraged me to look into supporting other early career teachers. So I did that for a number of years. I worked in the Teach for America nonprofit network, and then I helped, my first startup was actually a nonprofit. So I helped to launch a startup nonprofit that supported former educators to run for political office and become community organizers and advocates. And that was called Leadership for Educational Equity. And I was there for, about 5 years. That was the longest that I've been with a single company, and grew that team from 6 people to 200 people, and went from being a chief of staff, employee number 6, you do everything, to leading the team that worked with our investors and our board of directors and our financial supporters. And then following that, went into education technology and joined a company called Raise Me that maybe some of you might be familiar with, helps students to earn scholarships for college while they're still in high school. And was following that was at a company called Handshake, where I led cross-functional strategy. I'm sure many of you also have Handshake accounts, and now am at Jumpstart. And I think the through line in my career has always been helping folks who come from backgrounds like mine, who maybe don't have every opportunity or a network that's going to pave the way for their career, to find the path for them. And did that with educators and then with now early career talent, and have loved every minute of it. Wouldn't change a thing.
Awesome. It's a really interesting pathway from being a teacher to startup to tech, and then now you're kind of straddling the line a little bit, which is great. Can you talk a little bit about how your sort of sense of purpose in career has evolved as your career has evolved as well?
Absolutely. So I think that my sense of purpose has stayed pretty clear throughout. There's always been this element of how can we, at every company I've been at, how can we change the status quo to make sure that we're providing equality of opportunity or equity in access. And that's been a really cool thing to watch the industry change, while I've really held true to like that North Star for me personally, and what motivates me and helps me to work as much as I work. And so I think like that's been really nice, because I've watched the career landscape change over the course of my career. When I started, if I wanted to do the work that I wanted to do, really there were a couple of avenues. It was be in the nonprofit space, and then that was kind of it. And from there, I watched as technology companies began to shift the way that they operated from purely profit driven to more of an inclusive social impact orientation, which has been super fun to be a part of, because I think that companies can run and continue to exist, and also do good. And that's sort of a moral imperative for me and who I am as a person. I think like lots of tech companies have missions, and when you have a mission that resonates as deeply as Jumpstart's, right? Like make a process like recruiting or like hiring fair for everyone, or like Airbnb's belong anywhere. Like there are a few that you hear and you just sort of know deeply this must be part of the company's culture. And I'm lucky that has been continuous throughout my career.
Very, very cool. Actually, I have one more question.
Yeah.
So, if you're a student, especially now, there's so many things that you have to pay attention to, different accounts, different platforms, all these logins that you have to keep track of. I mean, this is true for a lot of us. So what makes, I'm sure most of the students are also, as you were saying, have handshake accounts or accounts to other sort of recruiting tools. What makes Jumpstart different? What's the value
Yeah.
proposition here that's different from handshake?
I love that question. So there's a couple of, I think, key pieces. And the first is that two-way communication that's happening between students and recruiters, or between students and students. And that peer-to-peer communication was something that a number of us at Handshake really wanted to see as part of the product, but it didn't exist when I transitioned to join this company. So that's one piece. And then I think there's a foundational element about the companies that we partner with and the way that Jumpstart profiles are built that gives more, I want to say, ownership to the student, where we're asking you, like, what parts of your identity do you want to bring to the job search? So for me, there wouldn't have been a really good way for me to indicate that I had one internship and that I had worked most of the way through my university experience. I think like there is a different, there's a different flavor to the kind of profile that Jumpstart students can create, where I can add information about the things that I value and what I'm looking for in a company. And those things our recruiters actively use. They're looking to build culture in their organizations. They're wanting to be intentional about the diversity of the talent pipeline that they're building. They want to make sure that equity is top of mind for all employees who are coming into their company and in their hiring process. And I think that those pieces are really unique to Jumpstart.
Okay, now I'm unmuted. That's great. Thank you for that answer. And I do want to throw it open for students. We still have a few minutes before the next presentation. So if anyone else has students that they want to, anyone else has questions that they want to ask Jenna?
There's one about joining the MESA community. You should have gotten an invite to the community, but Juan, I can write down your name. If you do not have the invite, we will make sure that you get it.
Oh, there it is. Other questions? I actually have another question. What are some aspects of what are some features for community that, I mean, is community a finished product? Is it what it's going to be? Or can you give us a hint as to what future directions you guys want to take it in?
Yeah, definitely. So I think there is a term in technology where we talk about product-led growth, and that's where product and design and the way that something's put together drives the growth of the company. I think that the way that Jumpstart works is a little bit different. We rely a lot on our partners. So we think internally about partner-led growth, or how partners or users give feedback. So this is the very first iteration of this tool, and I think we're going to watch how folks are utilizing it and then see how it will evolve from there. But some of the ideas that I've heard about that I think are so cool are a number of our partner companies. So think like NerdWallet, and there's a handful of others, Credit Karma, are using this community's functionality to engage former interns. So they'll build a private community that looks a lot like the MESA community for people who have interned at their companies. So that's a place where you all can go and continue to maintain relationship with recruiters at companies you've interned with potentially. So that's super cool. And then there are also some really interesting ones that I think could be coming up that are around inclusion at companies. So imagine if you're talking to a company and they're bringing in a representative, like the person who leads their employee resource group for I don't know, they're Latinx community members. So that's a unique like AMA environment inside of a community that could be run with somebody who some of us share background with at a specific company. So that's a great way to ask like really targeted questions about what that company's culture is. So those are two of the things that we are going to see on the horizon. And then beyond that, I am waiting to be surprised by the innovation that happens from both our student users and from the companies that we work with.
Thank you very much. That's really exciting to hear. So, oh, looks like we got a question. So it says, in what way would you continue to improve and move forward with this application? I think you kind of already answered that. And then how have you used your own experiences to better the networking for future users?
Ooh, love that.
That's a tough question for you. Haven't you been there a very short time?
Yep, I've been in seat for a month, so very little so far. But I love the question, and I think part of what inspired me to come here from a company like Handshake was we're giving the students who are on Jumpstart the power to really connect with one another and network together and learn from the wisdom of the group. And that to me is a massive differentiator, right? Like that was what was missing in my family. I didn't have cousins or siblings who had gone on and done these amazing internships at these phenomenal companies because that just wasn't my family's path. So it's the ability to find somebody who is in a role or who's gone through an application process that I'm going through would A, have made me feel a lot less lonely, but B, would have helped me to be more successful early in my career. So I think a lot of it in the beginning for me was luck, and I would like to take luck out of the equation. I would like to make it so that everybody from every background can really shine and have the same baseline knowledge and not benefit from accidental privilege because of where they were born or because of their background.
Great, thank you, thank you. So I think we're gonna give Jenna a quick or extensive virtual round of applause, and thank you for sharing your not only your product but also your experience and your and some of your core values with us. We're really looking forward to making this an exciting place for MESA students to congregate and to network and to build their fabulous careers. And we're also looking forward to continuing to work with you. So thank you very much, Jenna.
Of course. Happy to be here.
All right. So we're going to move on to our next distinguished speaker. We're going to be, it's my pleasure to introduce Tuina Das. Hopefully I'm not butchering the pronunciation of your name. And she is she works for Airbnb. And Airbnb is one of the really sort of disruptive companies of the last decade or so. And she's going to do a little bit of a workshop on building your personal brand. So Tuina, if you could give us a brief introduction before you get started, I'd appreciate that very much.
Awesome. Thank you, Tom. And thank you, Jenna, so much for your context. I feel like I've learned a lot in the past 20 minutes as well. Hi, everyone. I'm Tuina, as Tom mentioned. I'm a university recruiter at Airbnb, and I'm super excited to be involved with MESA. And I've been with Airbnb for 2 years now, but I've been in the university recruiting space my whole career. So it's really exciting for me to meet more students and get to know you and get to know what your motivations are. And I think through this session, hopefully you'll be able to uncover some of that for yourself and start to take away some sort of thoughts and insights and reflections on who you are and what your brand is. And we'll talk about this along a couple different dimensions. But before I get started, a couple ground rules here. Please engage in the chat. It would be awesome. There are certain areas where I might ask you to do a little activity, but I'd also just love to see your thoughts if you're willing to share with your peers and all of us on some of this content. And hopefully that way we can learn together. So yeah, let's get started. Love to move on to our agenda if possible. Awesome. So we're going to talk about a couple different things in the next 30-ish minutes. The first is really, what is a personal brand, right? I think it's really important to start to get a sense of who you are, both professionally and personally, and how to align those two things to help you grow in your career, right? The end goal is for you to have a really successful career journey that you have influenced through your personal experiences, right? You want everything to be aligned, and you want to make sure that you're reflecting a brand that you're proud of and that reflects your successes. Secondly, we're going to talk specifically about LinkedIn, because I think it's a really interesting platform and the ways recruiters use it are pretty specific. So I'd love to give you some tips on how to brush up your LinkedIn profile. And I'll mention some other tools to keep in mind as well, including Jumpstart, which is exciting. Third, I want to talk a little bit about the resume. I think the resume is such an interesting signal of our brand, right? Oftentimes in a job search, it feels like the most important document, but I want to sort of demystify the resume a little bit and talk about things you can do to set yourself up for success. Next, we're going to talk about telling your story. What does it mean to build a narrative around who you are and share that with other people professionally? A couple other tricks and tips at the end. And then if we have time, just a quick snapshot of what Airbnb has been up to. As you all know, it's been a really interesting year for all of us, including a company like Airbnb in the travel industry. So I'd love to share some transparent news about how we've been evolving and moving forward. And then we'll talk a little bit about student opportunities, and I'll leave the room open for Q&A. So it's a lot, but promise we'll get through it together. Cool. So let's just start off talking about your brand, right? Who are you as a student and professional? We can check out the next slide. So this is sort of an old reference of a movie. I don't know if anyone here has watched Zoolander, but you know, I want to remove some of the existentialism of your brand and you having to ask this like very nebulous philosophical question of who you are. And let's pare it down to the specifics so you can really start to crystallize that and build a really kind of impactful brand around it. So I wanted to first start off with a definition, right? What is a personal brand? A personal brand to me is a way of establishing and then constantly reinforcing who you are and what you stand for in your career and your life. And you know, you hear the word personal, but truly your personal brand should reflect you and your professional brand, because who you are and what you do should be integrated or at the very least aligned, right? Your values in life probably extend into the values that you bring into the workplace. The second thing to note about your personal brand is that it's evolving, right? Don't feel like you need to establish it today and it can never change again, right? This is dynamic. And as you bring in more internships, more life experience, more personal experience into your repertoire, you can add and change and evolve your brand as you feel relevant, right? And let me give you a quick example of my own brand. I don't know if anyone who's on the line has had a chance to look at the speaker bios for today, but my presenter bio is an example of my brand, right? It shows a little bit about what I'm excited about in the context of my work and also a bit about who I am. And so if you guys haven't had a chance to look at it, go back and check it out. If there's anyone here who has similar interests, would love to connect with you in communities, would love to learn about all of your interests, right? It's a great place to start. Cool, would love to move on to the next slide. Awesome. This is just another opportunity to think about, you know, what's great about you, right? In this case, Andy Dwyer is really confident that he's a nice person, and that's a part of your brand, right? If you're able to confidently say that and represent yourself in this way, that's really great. So on the next slide, we're going to have some tips around how to start thinking about your brand, right? There are a couple of key pieces. So one, this is an opportunity for you to be introspective, right? You should reflect on your strengths and your core skill sets that you're developing or that you want to develop to achieve your goals, right? And I think the first kind of very foundational way to do that is make a list, right? Make a list of the things that make you stand out, the things that you are developing in terms of your skills and your toolbox of things that you want to work on. And that list will start to help you crystallize what are the highlights within that define your brand. Fourth, define your audiences, right? Once you have an idea of who you are and the things that you stand for, try to define the different audiences that might need to interact with your brand, right? A recruiter might need to hear about your brand in a different way than a hiring manager or an interviewer or your peers, right? So it's really important to start thinking about the audiences that you will expose your brand to and how you do that. Next, I think this is something I recommend to folks in interviews, to a lot of different aspects of your job search and your career journey. But I think it's really important to find 2 to 3 crystallized examples of who you are, the experiences that you've had that showcase your skill sets, and build a narrative around that, right? Instead of trying to look at your entire breadth and body of work and trying to distill all of that down into a brand or, you know, an answer to tell me about yourself, pick a couple things that really showcase different aspects of your brand so that you always have that in your back pocket and you can refer to those examples when you're in a setting where you're talking to someone about your brand or talking to someone about your accomplishments. Next, I want you to work on your career fair pitch. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. We're going to talk a little bit more about embracing networking and events. And then lastly, one thing that I think is super important is being consistent. It's really important that if you're representing your brand somewhere, you want to make sure that it's consistent across channels, it's consistent across conversations you have, so that there are no mixed messages, right? So that everyone that you're speaking to and sharing your brand with gets a really good sense of who you are and what you stand for. So on the next slide, we're actually going to do a little activity around making this list. So here are some questions and areas of reflection that I pulled that I think are really good foundations to start thinking about your brand. So what I'd love is if you all on the line have like a pen and paper on hand, or if you're using like notes or Quip or something on your laptop, if you could take maybe 3 to 5 minutes to pick maybe 2 to 3 of these questions or a section that you're really interested in and just brain dump some of the answers to these questions. And I think that'll start to help you uncover who you are, what you're motivated by, what your brand potentially could be. So would love to maybe have Danielle or Tom start the clock, give you 3 to 5 minutes. Another thing I'd love is if anyone's willing to share answers in the chat or the Q&A, please let me know. I'd love to see kind of how you're thinking about these opportunities. Oh, also, it looks like the questions are repeated on 2 of these slides. That's a mistake, but you know, just there's lots of them. Pick 2 or 3, make it work. And we'll come back in maybe at 1:40, if that sounds good to the group. Cool. All right, I'm counting down. Awesome. Thanks everyone for taking a stab at putting together some reflections on who you are, what motivates you. I saw some really great responses in the chat around being really ambitious towards your goals and working hard, you know, being able to spend hours on creative projects and being really energized by those things. Does anyone else have anything they want to share? Maybe a value that you really look towards as your North Star, or anything else? Cool. All right, so let's move on. I encourage all of you to continue sort of noodling on these things as you evolve your brand. But one thing to think about is after you have all of this on paper and you've kind of thought through these questions and been able to uncover these things about yourself, you can start to build sort of a personal value proposition statement, right? This sort of kind of crystallizes the key things and the key traits that you want to exhibit in the rest of your brand. And that value proposition can sort of build a clear picture of who you are as a person, as an employee, as a colleague across all of your channels, right? And so I, again, can continue to emphasize that you should be reflecting on these things as you move through your college journey, right? Today, your brand might be something. Today, you're motivated by something, and 2 years down the road, it might be something else. So these kinds of things are really important to check in on for yourself and really help you grow. So let's now talk about LinkedIn. Happy to go on to the next slide about tips. But one thing I find that many students do these days is that they actually bypass LinkedIn completely, or they deprioritize it in favor of putting their profiles on other platforms. I think it's really important to be present on other platforms, Jumpstart included. But LinkedIn, I think, is a pretty crucial tool for getting your information in front of recruiters. Not because we're always looking to it as a source of truth, but a lot of the times we use it to confirm or corroborate information we see elsewhere, or use it as a way to access your profile to be able to reach out to you if we don't easily have your contact information. And so I think it's really important to take these tips and sort of start to bolster your LinkedIn presence, even if you're early on in your career journey. So a couple of things that I suggest, if you're comfortable using a photo of some sort, is really nice. So that shows that your profile is legitimate. Again, that's like a comfort level thing, but a lot of times there are profiles that pop up that are scams. So it's really important to look legitimate and show an employer that you're professional and that you have sort of your profile filled out, starting with your photo. Secondly, I think it is really important to complete the main profile sections, right? If you go on LinkedIn, you'll see a summary area, an area to put your work experience, potentially education. I think to the extent that's possible, it's really great to complete those so that you give as clear of a picture of your highlights to recruiters and hiring managers and interviewers as you can. Third, focus on key skills. So recruiters and others will actually often search the keywords that are related to the roles they're trying to fill, right? If a recruiter is looking for a software engineering intern, they're going to look for specific things in your headline or summary or job description or work experience descriptions that say that you've worked on specific languages, that say that you've worked in a specific tech stack, right? And these types of things are really nice to highlight on your profile so that you are easily exposed to the right recruiters when you're looking for opportunities. Fourth, this is really important. I think it's really important to map your experience on LinkedIn directly to what's on your resume, right? Again, we talked about your brand being consistent across channels. So your LinkedIn is an opportunity for, again, you to pick up the highlights of your resume and signal it to folks that might be coming across your profile to really showcase your accomplishments. The second thing I will say on that, though, is please be concise. I often see LinkedIn profiles that are copy pastes of people's resumes. Your LinkedIn doesn't need to be your full body of work, but I think the highlights are really important to reflect so that for recruiters going on there to corroborate what they see on your resume, they have the information they need right at the tip of their fingers. Next, I think it's really important to quantify your accomplishments to the extent possible, right? Saying that you're, for example, results oriented isn't not nearly as effective as kind of presenting your actual results, right? And that's something we're going to talk about on the resume as well. But whether it's, you know, a number of articles you've written or deals you've closed or internships you've had, like that's really great to see. And then next, ask for endorsements. So LinkedIn's really cool in that you can put down your skills and have other people share that they endorse you for that skill. They think you're good at it. They've worked with you in a context in which they've seen you excel in that skill. So ask people to do that for you. Ask people to write you recommendations. This is a really nice way for recruiters and others to bubble up your key skill sets and match those to the role that they're recruiting for. So let's say you're really good at Python, or you've worked extensively in Ruby on Rails. Make sure that you put that on your LinkedIn profile and have folks that have worked with you that can vouch for you endorse you so that we can see those as highlights. And then lastly, I think, again, this is an area around comfort, but if you're engaging with the platform, it's really cool to be able to comment for reach. So if there are folks that you admire that are posting on LinkedIn, I think it's really awesome to engage with their content so that you are visible in those areas and not just on your profile. So that's something to think about if you're excited about engaging with all of the different articles and posts on LinkedIn. I encourage you to do it without hesitation. Awesome. So a couple other platforms, obviously, I wanted to mention. There's so many places, as we were talking about earlier, that you can be present online as a student. But my main takeaway is, depending on your goals, right? If you're in a job search, or if you're looking for a particular opportunity, let's say you're looking for an internship, or you're starting a co-op search, it's really important to be present, right? My main takeaway is add your resume and your contact information in the areas that it's possible to do so, and engage to the extent that you can, right? These are places where recruiters are constantly digging for information. So for example, if your resume is not attached to your profile, we're getting an incomplete picture of who you are. Or if your email is not readily available, maybe there's an incredible opportunity for you and your background matches very well, but the recruiter has no way to find you, right? In that case, go back to our earlier point, really great to have a really nice LinkedIn profile so the recruiter can message you there. So it's really important to be consistent and find the opportunities in which you can engage with these platforms to the extent that you are able. Cool. All right, let's move on to the resume piece of your brand. So resumes can be daunting. I would say that as a recruiter in my career, I still struggle with sitting down and fluffing up my resume, editing it when I have new accomplishments, but I think it is such a key tool, right? And such a key signal to folks as to who you are and what you've done and what your brand is, that this is a really important thing to continue thinking about as you move along in your journey. So, there are certain things that I recommend for your resume. You can say things like you crushed it, you did a really cool job at your last internship. But I think what we're going to talk about more in our next slide is specificity, right? Let's get more specific than I crushed it, even though you probably did, right? Let's talk about how you did that. Cool. So let's talk about focusing on impact when you are putting together your resume, right? And I want to caveat this slide by saying, if you're early on in your career, if you're a freshman, if you're a sophomore, don't feel like you need to have the perfect resume that's filled out end to end right now, right? And resume, along with your brand, is a dynamic, evolving document that grows as you grow with your experience, right? So don't worry. These are just some tips to sort of ground you, but there's always room for improvement, right? Couple things to start off with: logistics. I personally believe that if you are not a PhD, or if you don't have 10 plus years of experience, your resume really should be one page. For context for students, right? It really depends on the company you're applying for, but a lot of the times, if you're interested in companies with a relatively steady volume of applications, recruiters have maybe 20 seconds to look at your resume. That's not a lot of time, right? You've spent tons of hours putting together this list of accomplishments, but on our end, we have 25 seconds to evaluate your potential for a role. So keep it short, keep it tight, keep it concise, and crystallize what you want to say. Secondly, this is interesting. This is an interesting point. So I think that function for a resume is a lot more important than form. Caveat: if you're in design, if you're a UI UX designer, if you're a product designer, if you're trying to map your resume to what your portfolio style is, do that. But I think at the end of the day, I would put fancy graphics and colors in the background and really push forward the things that you've done and really highlight the evidence around your brand and the work that you've accomplished. So how do you do that? My foundational framework as a recruiter, the thing that I look for in resumes is not just I did X, right? A lot of times on a resume, I'll see things like, here's the 5 things that I did at my job. But instead of that, what's frequently missing is the result of your responsibilities, right? Not only what you delivered, but how did you deliver impact through that work? What were the changes made? What were the processes updated? What were the statistics achieved, right? That's really important to share, because that shows that you actually did work that had influence and didn't just do work to do work, right? So the foundation I encourage you all to think about your resume in is, I did X, which resulted in Y outcome or impact, right? That second piece is really crucial, and that is the evidence that we want to see. So I also want to say that not every accomplishment that you made will necessarily fit this mold, right? But the more often that you can, the better, right? Let's say 75% of your resume is based on this impact model, and the other 25% was truly you just completing these large scale tasks that needed to be done. You can reflect that as well, but the more you quantify your accomplishments by impact, use data-driven evidence, use qualitative markers of results, right? I made this process different, and it resulted in a change so that 10 more folks could get onboarded onto the team within 3 months. These are the kinds of things that are really important to reflect. Next, I think it's really important to put your skills and technologies at the bottom of your resume. I think readability of a resume is actually really crucial, right? Again, when we go back to 30 seconds to a minute to look at your stuff, recruiters need to be able to quickly point out the things that they need to see. So I suggest, starting with your education up top, starting with, and then putting classwork next. It's very important for us to see what classwork you've taken so we can see where you are in your sort of major and your journey throughout the concepts that you're learning, so we know if you're ready or qualified for a specific role. And then at the bottom, I think leadership, volunteer experience, and skills and technologies can go in that order. The other thing that I personally suggest, there is no need for a summary section on your resume, right? A lot of times I see people waste maybe an inch or two of margin on a 3-sentence summary saying that they're results oriented and can solve problems and are looking for XYZ job. All of that should be apparent in your bullet points around your accomplishments, right? When I read your accomplishments and scan the evidence around what you've done and how successful you've been, that should tell me who you are. That should tell me you can problem solve. That should tell me that you're result oriented and can work with others, right? So don't feel like you need to waste time on a summary or a bio section on your resume. You can drop that on LinkedIn. Awesome. And then, as I mentioned, classwork is key. Drop that at the top of your resume. And then leadership and volunteer experience is super important to reflect, right? For recruiters, oftentimes what's really exciting is not just how you apply your major or your field of interest in school and at your internships, but how you show a passion or interest in that area outside of those channels, right? Are you maybe participating in hackathons, right? Are you taking leadership in student orgs? Are you doing self-started projects or building an app? Are you collaborating with folks, or do you have GitHub projects? All of these things are things that I think are great to reflect on your resume, because that helps you stand out from the crowd. And then lastly, as kind of a way to tie all of this together, right? This is a lot, I know it could be overwhelming. My suggestion for building your resume is this. Don't start by trying to fit this mold, right? A lot of times it's really hard to sit down and say, okay, how do I take all of my accomplishments and quantify them and put them into this impact framework and then make sure it fits into one page? It's difficult for me. So what I suggest is actually brain dump everything for each of your work experiences. Write down bullets, write down paragraphs, write down everything you've done, write down all the different impact you've made, right? And then once you have all the options, your menu of accomplishments and evidence on the table, you can start to go back and edit, pick out highlights, scrub until you get to that one-page crystallized resume. And then the other thing I suggest is, as your resume evolves with your brand, keep old versions. You might need to reference things, and it's also a really great way to track sort of the timeline of your brand and accomplishments, right? So for example, I still have my resume from when I was graduating college from 3 years back. And what that does is, if I am looking at a role in the future and there's a specific qualification that was on one of my previous resumes that I had something to do with, I can pull that back instead of having to remember, oh, in 2014, which at this point is a long time ago, what was I doing? A resume is a really clear way to keep track of your accomplishments. So save old versions, many years down the road, it'll be a really great way to see how you've evolved in your brand and in your career. Awesome. Oh, we have a question. Let's, I'll take those at the end, but let me just take a quick look. Awesome. I will get to you soon, Noah. Let's talk about telling your story. And I think the most effective way on the next slide to tell your story is to network, right? To get yourself in front of people so that you can expose your brand to them and tell your story. So how do we do that? A couple of tips that I have are around building your pitch, right? The first is tackling this question of, tell me about yourself, which is a tried and true question in many interview processes. These days, that question might sound a little different, but at the end of the day, the things people are asking you, or the thing that's at the core of the question is, who are you? What is your brand in a concise way? So what are people hoping to hear, right? Again, this comes back to picking out those 2 to 3 highlights from school, from your work, or your personal life that you can point to as your sort of shining star accomplishments, and that you can share in this moment when someone says, tell me about yourself. Keep it concise and high level, right? A lot of times when I ask this question, or when I'm asked this question, there is even a tendency even for me to start, getting really in the weeds of the last thing I did at my last job because I'm super excited about it. And then you're going on a tangent and not able to share a kind of the wider picture of who you are. So an example, I would say, off the top of my head, right? If someone asked me, tell me about yourself, I could say, hey, I'm Tuhina. I've been a university recruiter at Airbnb for 2 years. At Airbnb, I've really been invested in developing programs like technical boot camps that really help up-level students' knowledge of the tech stack so that they can be successful in Airbnb and the industry. At my past job, I was focused on operations and systems for helping retain and hire some really incredible people into the company. And throughout all of these experiences, my priority has been candidate experience and providing really great opportunities for students to learn and grow, both through programs, campus engagement, and other opportunities to engage, right? Something like that. Obviously, that was off the top of my head. You know how it would have been better is if I rehearsed. So my next point is phone a friend, right? Find someone, find a peer, find a mentor, find someone that you can share your pitch with and build that feedback loop, right? Try to pretend like you're in a role play situation, that you're in an interview or you're at a career fair, and try to go through your pitch. Give yourself 2 to 3 minutes on the clock, see how it goes. Then that person can give you feedback. Then you can switch, right? These are the kinds of things that I think are really important. And of course, my pitch just now is pretty short for the sake of time, but I think giving yourself maybe 2 minutes, 3 minutes to tell that story is more than enough. And lastly, put your pitch to practice, right? It's all well and good if you've spent countless hours developing the perfect 2-minute spiel about yourself, but if you're not able to practice it, then you don't know what you can evolve, right? You don't know how people are responding to your brand. You're not getting any sort of real life feedback. So go to career fairs, in this new world that we have, go to virtual events. The fact that you're even here today is huge, right? You are taking the time to start learning about these things so that the next time you appear in front of a recruiter or hiring manager, you have more tools in your arsenal. So definitely practice, practice, practice. And don't be afraid to slip up. Don't be afraid to, again, evolve the way you talk about your brand, evolve your pitch as you start to see what's working for specific audiences, right? So definitely keep that in mind. All right, some final tips and tricks are on the next slide. This is just a way to round out some of the stuff we talked about and a couple other things. How to stand out in a crowd, right? The first thing is just around cover letters. So this is a moment for a real talk from me. You're gonna have to write cover letters in your career at some point, but my tried and true opinion is write them only if it's required. So if there's an application you're filling out and there's an asterisk on the cover letter, meaning you can't continue unless the cover letter is filled out, of course, write the cover letter, you have to. But if it's optional, and if you're not interviewing for a startup that has a very, very niche role or some other company where you're really just trying to get your skill set to fit exactly into the role they're looking for, don't need to write a cover letter, right? Again, volume is key. Recruiters don't have as much time. We need to see a really great resume, and I'd rather you spend your time and energy building that incredible resume over writing cover letters. But if you feel compelled to write a cover letter, if you feel compelled to have a template on hand, which I think is always great for anything, keep it short and sweet, right? Cover letters to me are max 2 paragraphs that again highlights your key accomplishments. Don't need a page, don't need a page and a half. The shorter, the better. Awesome. Second, create a GitHub profile. If you're in a technical opportunity or a technical field, that's a great way to signal to interviewers and other technical folks what you've worked on, right? An interviewer can jump into your GitHub profile 30 minutes before you're chatting, and it's a great way for them to understand who you are and what work that you've done, and that can start to contextualize for them sort of your skill set and how much of a fit you would be for that company, which is awesome. Third, we talked about consistency. Again, keep your accomplishments consistent across platforms. But second to that is audit your online presence, right? In this day and age, again, it's easy to find ourselves on a variety of platforms. It's easy to forget what platforms we're on, or it's easy to forget that people have access to places where we are interacting, right? So if you have a Twitter and you don't want recruiters to see it, or you do, make sure that it's audited, right? Make sure it's public if you're posting a lot about your skills or retweeting TechCrunch. And if you want to show that you're engaging in that way, you can do that. But make sure that you know where you exist online, and you can sort of toggle the controls on who you want to have access to that information and who you don't. Next, cold reach outs. Okay, so this is really important to me as a recruiter, so I'd love to share a little bit more with you all. I oftentimes, obviously, get hundreds and hundreds of emails from students on LinkedIn, or actually through my Airbnb email to folks that I might not have given them my email. So I appreciate the hustle. So a lot of folks find me through various channels or assume what my email is. Super cool. If you're going to email a recruiter, which I absolutely think you should do, right? First of all, yes, get in touch with recruiters, be proactive. Don't take no for an answer, or just try if you find someone that you think you want to talk to or that could give you access to opportunities, right? But if you're doing that, be strategic and be personal, right? That's our goal as recruiters, is to give you a personal experience. So if you're trying to get in touch with someone at a company that you're excited about, first is be strategic, right? Instead of spraying to play, instead of emailing every recruiter under the sun, it's really important to go back to your brand, right? Go back to your brand and say, okay, my brand tells me that these 10 companies are showing me that they can meet the needs that I have, and that their mission aligns with my brand. So I'm going to reach out to these 10 companies. And when you do reach out, make it personal, right? It's really easy to BCC 500 recruiters on an email that just says, hey, I'm Tuhina, please hire me. But the more you can sort of funnel that pipeline of your interest and say, hey, Tuhina, I actually saw you were a recruiter at Airbnb, and before that you worked at Dropbox. I'm really curious to hear about your experience, and I'm also interested in this internship role that you have open. Let me know if you can check out my application. That sits a lot better with recruiters, and that makes us more inspired to help out, right? Especially when the volume of folks that reach out is so high. So that's a big tip I have for you. Next, make a list of people you admire. I think the beauty of the internet, the beauty of this access we have as a world now, is that everyone is accessible in the way that they interact with content, with the world. So if there are certain folks in the industry that you admire, whether it's an engineer, whether it's a designer, whether it's a leader, whether it's a CEO, whether it's someone in a nonprofit, find where they kind of have curated their brand online, right? And watch them and listen to them for notes. Look at who they're interacting with, see what they're posting, see which articles they're retweeting, kind of absorb the information that they're putting out there, and use that to help you build your brand, help you build your kind of repertoire of tools, help you build your knowledge, right? That's a really important way that we can grow, is by looking at our peers, our mentors, and our leaders in the community. And lastly, I think it's super important to believe in yourself, right? I think, especially in this world where I super feel for all of you students, because things have just been turned upside down. But at the end of the day, I think when you develop your brand, it's an opportunity to say, here is who I am, and this is valuable, right? And you can add value. There's so many places in this world and companies that you're going to add value. So believe in your brand, believe in yourself, use that as a signal and a driving force for your career, and be able to share that you've done all these incredible things, and this is why you'd be a good fit for roles. So sometimes easier said than done. I think we're all on our personal journeys regarding that, but know that you have skill sets to offer, that you have interests in certain areas that you can share with others. And that's, something you can carry with you throughout your experience. Cool. On to the next. So that was mostly what I had for tips and tricks. I'm going to go through a super quick Airbnb overview, and then I'd love to follow up on that Q&A and answer any other questions. But let's just zip through this. I'd love to share with you kind of what we've been up to. This is just a quick snapshot of Airbnb's leaders. I wanted to show you that we have a pretty large group of folks that are involved in sort of steering our ship towards the direction that we want to go in as a company. So next, I want to sort of talk about our mission. So on the next slide, you're actually going to see our mission statement as a company. Airbnb exists to create a world so that anyone can belong anywhere, right? And for us, belonging and anywhere, right? What do these things mean? What does anyone mean? So for belonging, it means really feeling connected to people around you and to the communities around you, right? And anywhere for us truly means that when people are traveling or experiencing new things, they can do that through all the channels available. And then again, with anyone, it's really our goal to provide access to experiences and connection for truly all people of all creeds, backgrounds, and from all walks of life. And that's something that we prioritize as we build our community in Airbnb. So what is our role in building this mission, right? Airbnb employees, we are in partnership with our hosts to help our guests find belonging, right? So our hosts are our partners and our guests are our customers, and we want to connect these two groups to help them find belonging. And that's what sort of our charter is as a company and as employees. Awesome. And so I think a lot of the ways that you really do that is through community, right? Airbnb is truly united with our community to try and create this world that we want to see, where people are connecting over boundaries, over all sorts of backgrounds, and over borders, right? So our goal at the end of the day is to build community, to uplift community, and to energize community to do this work and foster belonging. A couple community fun facts that I just wanted to share. 83% of our hosts are outside of the US. So Airbnb is truly a global community at this point, and it is our priority to ensure that we support hosts and guests all around the world. And this is obviously, really exciting that internationally we have so much support and excitement from the hosts on our platform. Next, we have 55%, actually I believe this number is a little higher now, 55+% of our hosts identify as women, which I think is super exciting because we want to provide this access to hosting and entrepreneurship and building economies and community to folks of all backgrounds. So it's really awesome to see that there is a group, or there are opportunities for everyone as hosts. Next, I love this stat. At this point, I think it's almost 400 million, but 400 million plus nights have been had on Airbnb where hosts and guests are from different countries. And that is super awesome to me because it shows that people are meeting across borders, across country lines, across different creeds, and really getting to connect and meet someone that they may not have otherwise met and have an experience that they may not have otherwise had, which I think is a really powerful thing. And then our last fun fact here is we've paid out at this point, actually, again, these stats are a little old, $70 billion+ in payouts to our hosts. And that is super exciting. We're driving entrepreneurship. We're asking hosts to contribute back to their communities. And the way that we do that is by energizing them and energizing the economy and being able to drive this entrepreneurship to our hosts to then, build community and build connection. This is a quick slide about just how our company is structured. I won't spend too much time on this, but currently we have our 4 sort of core product areas: homes, which you all are probably familiar with; experiences, China, because we have to operate differently in China; and then Airbnb.org, which sort of spearheads our philanthropic efforts through the product. Then we have a bunch of platform teams supporting those core product areas. And then we have the central teams, which support sort of the logistics of running the business. So that's like finance, marketing, recruiting, legal, etc. That's kind of how we're structured. I think it's always fun to see because different companies do things differently. Awesome. So embracing the adventure. This is just one thing that I want to talk about because we are driven by curiosity and optimism. This is one of our actual company values. And I think it's especially relevant in these times, right? The last 6 months have been an adventure, for better or for worse. And we want to embrace the opportunities we have through this adventure to do good and build community. So a couple ways that we're doing that. This year we explore new ways of connecting. And one of those ways was through online experiences. I don't know how many students on the line have taken any, but we've had experiences on Airbnb on the platform for a while. And those are activities you can do in person with hosts in various areas. But this year in April, very recently, we moved a lot of our experiences online. So it's a really great way of connecting with your friends, with your colleagues, with your family, to host activities with professionals and subject matter experts and have a really good time. So this year we did online experiences where you could cook with famous chefs like David Chang, or I've taken an online experience. I've taken quite a few now, but I took one that I really loved where I did meditation with sheep in Scotland. So this woman took us on a virtual tour of her beautiful sheep farm out in the Scottish Highlands, and then we meditated with her daughter. So like these kinds of experiences that, you know, I can't go to Scotland right now, but I can still have this in my home and have a really good time are just great ways to connect with my friends and family. So if y'all have the opportunity, I highly suggest checking them out. They're super affordable. There's something for everyone. So definitely go on there and check out how you can connect virtually with your friends. And the last thing I wanted to talk about is open homes. Open homes is actually a super exciting part of Airbnb. So on the next slide, you're going to see sort of our nonprofit partners, and I'll talk a little bit more about what Open Homes is, but we partner with a lot of incredible nonprofit organizations around the world to help us drive our mission of using our product for good through Open Homes. So on the next slide, you're going to see that the Open Home program extends Airbnb's core product to serve those in need. So what does that mean? Moving on to the next slide, it essentially means that, this slide sort of gives you the rundown of what Open Homes does. We help disaster evacuees, we help medical and frontline workers, relief workers, medical patients, and refugees by providing essentially free housing during humanitarian crises, right? So this program began with disaster response. And if you go to the next slide, it basically meant that we initially were providing free housing during disasters, right? Whether it was the bushfires in Tasmania or flooding in a certain part of the world or something similar, we wanted to activate free housing so that folks who were in need, who were evacuating, could have somewhere safe to shelter while they were getting back on their feet. And on the next slide, we've since developed more causes for housing, right? Like we mentioned, if you click through, then you'll see one of the things that we did this year is we really focused on 2020 frontline stays. What that means is we activated open homes for folks who needed housing if they were a relief worker or a first responder through the COVID-19 crisis. So over 200,000 places to stay were activated. And by activated, what I mean is our host community actually decides to opt in to house to open up their homes for free for these programs during the period that we're activating open homes. So if you are a host already, you can activate free housing. If you've never housed anyone before, but you think this is a really great time to support the community, you can activate a free space in your house. And that's what we started earlier this year. And over 100,000 nights have been booked by frontline workers so that they can stay safe if they're working in a hospital, if they're working on the ground or in the field. And we've partnered with over 40 government and healthcare partners around the globe to really extend this opportunity to areas of need as we all work through this crisis together. Awesome. And so, you know, we are kind of serving the needs right now for free stays, but a couple other areas that we're also looking into, if you click through, are discounted stays. You know, what is the opportunity outside of these crisis moments where we can start to intake folks that are in need and provide the opportunity for discounts so that they also have the ability to access Airbnb. The third is donations. We actually did roll out donations for the first time this year through Open Homes, and you were able to donate to frontline responders if you weren't able to activate your house. So any one of you had the opportunity to do that, and we're going to continue providing ways for our hosts and our guests to be able to donate through our platform to communities in need. Awesome. And then this last slide is, I just want to highlight a couple of things that we've been up to this year and beyond in some of our priorities. The first was a Superhost Relief Fund. So Superhost on the platform of folks who've been hosting for a specific amount of time and who have been sort of flagged as sort of, you know, torchbearers of the host community. And we, as a company, developed a relief fund to help them through this economic crisis. Our founders donated, employees donated our travel credits to this fund. And so we really want to make sure we're taking care of our hosts. Second, to take care of our guests, we rolled out an enhanced cleaning protocol so that if you're traveling as a guest, you can opt into Airbnb listings that have themselves opted into cleaning their house at a standard that we've developed with the CDC and other medical partners and leaders in healthcare, so that you have peace of mind if you're using Airbnb during this time. Third, fighting discrimination and making Airbnb more diverse. This is actually a really interesting point for us. I don't know if anyone who's a user has seen the emails come through, but we just started a project called Project Lighthouse, and it is our sort of energy around trying to proactively address discrimination on our platform and block it before it happens instead of being reactive. So we're putting together a lot of mechanisms to be able to flag things before it happens so that we can address these pain points and make Airbnb more accessible for everyone across backgrounds. Next, we are committing to belonging in all communities. We had a really active Pride Month recently. We raised thousands of dollars for a number of charities through the Pride group at Airbnb. We made a public statement on DACA and added our name to the briefings around supporting students who are here and trying to do amazing work in their careers and their school journeys. And then, you know, we are really, as a company right now, trying to take action around anti-racism and allyship. So the ways that we've done that are multifold. We are bringing in leading experts in the industry around these topics and having conversations with them instead of trying to assume that we know everything internally. We, as a company, worked with Pharrell Williams to make Juneteenth a national holiday starting next year. We have also, as employees, received time off that's separate from our normal paid time off to attend protests and support movements for justice, which I think has been really awesome, that we have not been dinged negatively if we want to take time off during the workday to go support the BLM movement or protests or just areas in which we find that we want to exercise our civic duty and our voice. So that's been really awesome. Our Blackout resource group has been developing incredible anti-racism and allyship guides. If you, again, are an Airbnb user, we actually send that out to our entire user community and host community. So if anyone's found anything interesting in there, I highly encourage you to check that out, but I'll share all of those resources after today as well, so that we can continue to grow together. And with that, I think I had one last thing around opportunities for students. I did want to mention really quickly what's going on at Airbnb. Sorry, I jumped ahead of the gun. But as you all know, again, Airbnb has been struck by the force of COVID-19 and the industry. And you know, we are all still grateful to be here and to be able to support communities. But what that has done is changed the nature of our business. So at this time, we're not hiring any technical folks into roles in 2021. So we're not hiring new grads or new interns for 2021 on the technical side. For non-technical roles, we'll kick off those conversations in the spring. However, we are actively engaging folks now who might be interested in 2022 opportunities, which is kind of crazy to think about because it's so far out, but that's really the reality of where we are. So we want to get to know you now in case you're interested in opportunities 2 summers out. We would love to chat. And even if not, we would love to continue engaging with you through the Jumpstart community, so you can voice what you want to hear of more from us and how we can support you in your journeys. And that is all. Sorry, I went over time, but I'm excited about this. And I hope you all found some takeaway here that you can use in your journey. And now I will stop talking. Thank you all so much.
Actually, thank you, Tuina. Could you actually, though, answer that question that you were going to answer?
I would love to. All right. So Noah has asked, on a resume, does general volunteer experience look as close to or as impressive as volunteer experience similar to the line of work you're attempting to be hired for? That is a great question. I would say that, you know, depending on the amount of volunteer experience you've had the opportunity to have, if you find that it's relevant in showcasing your leadership skills or your skills in supporting your community, I say reflect that, you know, despite what field it relates to or whether or not it's directly aligned with, you know, your computer science major or whatever. If you've, let's say, volunteered in your community for 10 years, or if you've taken on a leadership role, that is just as exciting, because I think it's important to know for us that students are getting involved in their communities in a really impactful, meaningful way, right? I wouldn't put, you know, if it's something simple or if something that, you know, you worked on with 100 other people and it didn't have some sort of lasting impact, unless it's related to your field, I would really focus on areas that you volunteered in where you really felt like you made an influence and an impact and had the opportunity to grow. So I think regardless of whether it's related to your field of study, I would reflect impactful volunteer experience on your resume. And then if you find, 4 years down the line, you're a senior and you're running out of room on your resume and it's looking like 2 pages, you can start to optimize for which bits of volunteer experience or which bits of leadership are particularly exciting to reflect for your employers, right? But at the beginning, if you have the space for it, drop in the volunteer experience that is really meaningful to you. As long as it's meaningful to you, right? That's something you want to reflect on your resume because that's your brand. And so I would start by thinking like, is this meaningful to me? Is this something that I'm really proud of? And is something that I want to show people I'm proud of? I would put it on your resume. I hope that helps.
Cool. I think you got a couple other questions.
Cool.
I think the first question around an example of an effective resume, we could probably, I don't know if you want to share one of those, but like we could probably put it up, we could share it within the MESA community along with maybe your presentation so that folks could access it within communities.
Yeah, that sounds great. I don't know if I have like a technical resume off the top of my head because I wouldn't want to share someone else's sort of private information, but I'm happy to share my resume and put myself out there, and it's a little scary, but if you all want to take a look, I think I've done some work on mine, and it can at least start to help you contextualize like format and the types of things to highlight. So I can do that, and you can all pick apart the work that I've done and ask questions.
Cool. That sounds like folks think would be helpful. So if you wouldn't mind posting that, I think we'll get you onto the community and you can post it on community. Obviously, black out the relevant. You don't want people like, calling your personal phone or whatever.
Totally. Yeah. Go ahead.
And then we have another question about how to include class projects that would reflect well on someone's resume with equally relevant work experience when we can't go over 1 page in length.
Got it. Okay. I think that's a really good point. Really interesting piece that you've brought up around class projects. So I suggest that unless you did something particularly like a stretch, you did some sort of stretch work on a class project, I don't think it's as important to reflect class projects on your resume, because to me, if I know a school well and I know that everyone in the Intro to Algorithms class has to do this like specific project, it doesn't show me that you're that different from another candidate from that school, right? Because I know now that everyone has to do this. This is a requirement of the class to get a grade, so it's not as exciting as me seeing your work experience. So I would say if you're running out of room, prioritize your work experience, your leadership experience, and your volunteer experience. If you have class projects that you're able to share, put it on GitHub, right? Put it in your profile, put it somewhere where we can still access it, but it's linked away from your resume so that if we want to know more about what you did or how you did it, we still have that. So I would do that. Okay. And yes, I would leave early if you need to. Gabriel, go to class. Good luck. Awesome.
That's a pretty sound answer. Unless there are other questions for Tuina, we want to give her a big round of applause for sharing, again, her wisdom and her experience as a recruiter. Do we have any more questions? I think we're good. So thank you very much. It was a pleasure to have you with us on this launch.
Yeah.
Looks like, oh, Danielle's, yeah, there we go. All right. Thank you. And I do have a few sort of like internal, well, not internal, but like some logistical points to point out about this community. So for the MESA students, if you look at, you should all be now members of the MESA community. And if you go there, you'll see there are 4 different topic areas. There's a place for announcements. There's also a place for alumni, because we're going to have recent alumni and even older alumni as a part of the MESA community as well. So, MESA alums who are looking to provide mentorship, or if you're looking for an alum who's going to, to potentially be a mentor or provide some advice, that would be a place to go. We also are going to have a place for job and internship opportunities, and we've definitely been approached by many companies to do this. Even some companies that are not currently on Jumpstart are excited to jump in on Jumpstart because they want to be able to communicate with MESA students like yourselves. And then we also have a topic area for just general questions to the MESA community. So that's where you could post questions to me at the state and other folks at the statewide office, or you could just post it to other students to get a sense of what their experience is like, to compare to your own experience on your own campus. So this is one of the reasons why we are so excited to partner with Jumpstart in that, unlike Handshake, this is Jumpstart is not a campus-specific platform. So I think it's unique in the allowing students not only to communicate with each other within your campus, but you can also communicate with students across campuses, across different universities. And we are a multi-campus program, so it makes sense that we would be excited to be here. So I wanted to make a couple announcements about our annual Student Leadership Conference. We usually do this live, obviously, in the fall, but this year, for obvious reasons, we're going to be doing our Student Leadership Conference virtually. It's going to happen in November, so it should be past the dates where some of the other sort of engineering organizations have their national conferences and so forth. So our Student Leadership Conference, our virtual conference, is going to be happening on November 6th and November 13th. Those are Fridays, right? We're still working on some workshops to get online, but we are definitely going to have multiple recruiter panels, and I'm assuming that Tuhina will be a part of one of those as well. And we're going to have multiple alumni panels as well as workshops as well. There should, looks like there's a question. Yeah, so there should be 3 time slots per Friday, and you guys will all have the option of choosing which session to join in. So Friday the 6th, Friday the 13th, I think our first workshops will happen on at around 10 o'clock. It'll be like 10, 12, and 2, somewhere around there for the workshops. The workshops themselves will be not too long because I think we're all getting a virtual conference fatigue. So we want to make sure that it's short to the point and that it engages you and doesn't lose your interest. Additionally, we're going to have a so when we have the conference all set to go, we will be advertising it here, and you must be on Jumpstart to be able to participate in the Student Leadership Conference. And then on a third Friday, November 20th, we'll be doing our mock interviews. So the main body of the conference is accessible to whomever is in the MESA community. We're going to do mock interviews with a smaller number because it really depends on how many volunteers we get to conduct those interviews. And we'll be conducting them on Zoom. What we'll do is convene everybody, the interviewers and the students together to set some ground rules and define the parameters. And then we will be putting you into individual breakout rooms. So the UCOP account for Zoom has a limit of 50 breakout rooms. So in any given session, we can match 50 interviewers with 50 students. If somehow we get more than 50 people who are willing to interview, then we would actually do multiple sessions on that Friday. Let's see. Is there anything I'm missing, Danielle, that you wanted me to hit?
No, I think you covered everything.
Okay, so I just wanted to reinforce how much we appreciate both Jenna and Tuina making time to present and communicate with our students. We are so excited to be launching this new experience for us. It's very interesting to hear Tuhina's talk about building a personal brand, and makes me, it immediately made me think of just signing on to Jumpstart. You know, when you're building that profile, it's a lot of those questions are the same as the questions that Tuhina was asking about. So you can see that there's an alignment here that you know, when you say building a personal brand, it sounds very like, it can sound like you're using some jargon, but really what we're asking you to be more intentional about how you present yourself to the public, right? What is the professional reputation that you want to develop? Because, you know, that's how you want to connect with your peers. That's how you want to connect to your next job. It really is like, you know, being very thoughtful and conscious about how you present yourself to the world. So it's great to see that what Airbnb is doing is very much in line with Jumpstart and their approach, and we're excited to be a part of it as well. I would love for anyone else to, well, are there any last minute questions from students or comments from our panelists? We good?
Thanks for having us.
All right. Not too bad for our first go around. Hopefully this will be the first of many, but we will all see you soon. Thank you very much, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Take care,
Thank you so much.
everyone.